Okay, welcome everyone. It's that time of the year again where we do the Atlantic Crossing webinar. My name is Nick Olsen. I've worked for Predict Wind for nearly a decade. I'm a sailor and have sailed most of my life. And really what we're here for is to give you an oversight of some of the things you can do in Predict Wind and how we can help you to make better decisions out on the water and keep yourselves safe. So let's get started. I will share my screen. So how do you get into Predict Wind, how you use it, and we have, two main apps. We have the Predict Wind app and we have the offshore app. So the Predict Wind app is when you're on a high-speed connection, cell connection, and so whether you're at home or at the marina, or even if you've got Starlink on your boat, you could use this. There is a few caveats there. If you want to save data for offline, you should use the offshore app. So the offshore app is really what you use. I will use that even if I'm going coastal sailing, because I'll know I'll be going out of cellular reception, etc. And so I'll use the offshore app. And so the offshore app is designed to be able to control your file downloads, file size downloads, and that sort of stuff. You can do your weather routing on it, departure planning, view all sorts of stuff, which we will actually cover in the second webinar. Will be about communications and the offshore app and how to use that. So whether you're using that with, any type of connection. Today, we're really going to focus on some features and weather routing, departure planning, but we're going to do that all in the Forecast website, which is the same as the Predict Wind app. And so what can you use that on? You can use that on, your Mac, an iPad, an Android, PC, all of those, any popular platforms, you can use that software. Where's my pilot chart gone? We're going to start over here with our pilot chart. I'll zoom out. This is actually not even a fully finished feature. Just went live yesterday, but pretty cool to look at for what we're going to talk about today. For doing any ocean passage, we can look at these charts and see what the averages are. So I'll just zoom in one more step there, and this is probably at the beginning of any passage planning. We would want to look at this, or even a location we're going to, and but yeah, if we look at where we're going to go from across here to across here, and I'm in September at the moment, and if I come through and go to October, November, and December, and you kind of really quickly sort of start to see why, what the traditional routes are. Obviously the northern route, that's why no one does that, because the wind's going the wrong way. And we obviously always come down here and come across and have the wind behind us. And, even taking that more east to west route, you can see why at the end you might actually get caught out with some headwinds. That can be a lot more risky, that route. If I click on one of these windroses, I can see all the information about it. And yeah, it's definitely a pretty cool feature, and that'll be coming across all the apps shortly. At the moment, it's only on the web. I'll just quickly explain a tiny bit more about this, assuming we're looking at it. If I zoom in, I'll get more and more windroses, and basically the whole world is being chopped up into 30-kilometer squares, and it's using 10 years of ECMWF data averaged out per month, and yeah, it's pretty cool. And so the more I zoom in, the more detail I get. So until I get to a 30-kilometer square. So it's very cool. And yeah, it's just a I guess the first step in planning is you know, planning our passage. Come over. This is where we're going to go to. So coming over here, something else that we've done recently. We've always been able to have split screens, but what we couldn't do before was have different parameters on that split screen. And so this is super useful for our planning, for analyzing weather, and just seeing, you know, any combination of weather together. And you see here, I have CAPE, convective available potential energy, and I have rain together. And I'm obviously I'm looking at an area that it has pretty high levels of CAPE. And so on my left screen is my CAPE, and on the right screen is my rain. And the reason I have those two parameters together is that you need you probably don't want, but for thunderstorms to be a thing that you have to be aware of, you need rain, so you need moisture, and you need your higher CAPE levels. And that's, you get those two things together, and you definitely want to start thinking about thunderstorms. So nice to be able to have those two parameters together. If I wanted to, I can change to any parameters. I can even have I could have wind and gust together. If I wanted, I can look at different models. So we can actually, you know, put a whole lot of different parameters there, which we couldn't do before. And really nice to be able to compare those things. And you'll see me probably talk about looking at gust, or, you know, versus the gust versus the average wind speed later on. You can see over here we have this particularly nasty system that's just been named, but a good example for us to look at what the GMDSS graphical forecast does. You see I'm slightly ahead of the time there, and that's what this little thing is here. We can use this whether we are anywhere we are, so we can use this, see this in the weather routing, departure planning, or just looking at maps like this. And what we do is we take the written forecast, the written GMDSS forecast, and we convert it into graphical features like this. So that's what you can see on the map here. And so if I click on that, it will tell me what that feature is, and I can click on the text, and down here, if I scroll down, you'll see the highlighted part is what the feature is referring to on the screen. And this is a nice safety feature. If you look at the GMDSS as it is, it takes a lot of reading to understand where you are. So if I close that, and I'll go off the split screen, and I zoom out a bit more, and we can see these features all around the world. And we might have a look at this one a bit later when we run our weather routing. Very shortly, you will actually be able to see these moving into the future. They will, as you move the timeline on the map, you'll see at the moment that they disappear once it's gone out of the relevant time that it's looking at. Shortly, it's actually going to look further into the future. So that'll be nice, especially when if I scroll my map forward here and we see these, you know, features sort of developing in the grids. But the GMDSS, even if we don't see it in the grids, sort of probably a bit like now, you know, it's not super obvious. And then the GMDSS will actually warn us about these situations. So it's pretty cool, you know, so that we're not, you know, we've got more than just numerical models in here. Right, just move my zoom controls. We've looked at that. Okay, so we are really here today to talk about weather routing and departure planning and the tools around that. So Over here on this main menu, we have departure planning and weather routing. And I can click on either of those and I can have sail planning or power planning. So if you've got a power boat, we do have a completely separate algorithm for routing that. But mainly we're going to talk about sail planning and planning and sail weather routing. So I click over here and I see the sail routing. Before we really get into any weather routing, to know why do we do weather routing? Because if I come back here to one of these maps, this one, and I look at the systems in here, and I'm going from, over here to over here, knowing where I'm going to be, as these systems move, where I'm going to be 10 days from now is very, very hard to do unless you have a really good weather routing tool. And so, we rather than guessing where we're going to be, what the weather state is going to be in 10 days time or 5 days time or 2 days time, we run our weather routing or departure planning to see when we should leave. And we look at that and we can make better decisions. So, and I'll talk about sort of that some of the decision making process as we go. So I'm back over here on my weather routing tab, and I've run a weather route. And but before we go any further, we're going to jump into our routing preferences and we're going to look at polars. So I can do this in departure planning or weather routing. We'll go and do it in departure planning. It's exactly the same process for setting up the polars, and we have to set up our polars before we go and use this tool. Like you need to know how fast your boat's going to go in any conditions. We do have well, let's just get in there. So you'll see here I have, I can choose the models for my departure planning. And the reason for that, if I was doing a short trip up the coast, I would probably use the PWG and the PWE because they, up the coast, they'll do high resolution, so 1 kilometer resolution modeling, so really detailed. But if we're doing a big global passage like crossing an ocean, we want to use these global models, the ECMWF, GFS, UKMO, and SPIRE. And just some settings here, but we want to show these extreme weather warnings. That's something we always want to have that turned on. I don't know why you'd ever turn that off. And anyway, we come down here to our boat polar. So our boat polar is just defining how fast our boat goes in any given wind condition. And when we scroll down, we'll look at wave conditions. So the easiest way to do this is to be on this predefined setting here. And in that predefined setting, I can come in here and I can click on this and I can choose a boat, my type of boat, whatever. If my boat's in here, I can choose that. If your boat isn't in here, you can choose one that is similar to yours. Often, a boat that has a similar performance to you. And what should we be? Leopard 50. And so you can choose that boat, or you can, there's a few other ways to do it. But choosing one that's like yours, if your one's not there, is a good thing. Even if your boat is there, you're going to want to check your polars for accuracy. So something that we talk about quite a lot nowadays, and we'll probably talk about a little bit more in the next webinar, are our AI polars. And what we are doing with the AI polars is you need to have a data hub, which is a little device that we sell. And in that device can actually read your NMEA data, sends that data back to our servers, and our servers can update your polar to make it more accurate. So it doesn't matter whether you're the best sailor in the world or perhaps just not that good. It doesn't care. It just knows how you sail your boat, and it records that. And it's actually quite interesting to see how that goes, because people often think that their boat performs a particular way, but that's not actually how they sail it. And obviously, the predefined polars are generally from the designer, and they can often be quite optimistic. Whether you might have a ton more gear on your boat than what the design specifications are. We can use the advanced polar, and this is what a polar curve looks like, a polar table looks like, and this is your polar curve. You can see on each one of those, as I go across, it highlights the table. You don't need to get too stuck into this if you don't want to, and especially not today. But once you actually get a handle on this, it's pretty easy. We've got our true wind speed down here and our true wind angle in each of these columns. So 50 degrees true wind angle, 70, 90, 100. And that could even be simplified. You could drop out some of those true wind angles. Probably not 110 for a catamaran. That would be silly, because that's a popular, good angle. Or maybe not for this one. Doesn't look like it likes 110 or 120. But anyhow, so we can adjust our polars. We can import a polar and we can export a polar. If all of that is all too much for you, and your boat is very heavy and pretty much goes the same speed the whole time, you can use what we call a sail polar. This is the most simple polar. Doesn't do the best job, but if your boat is always going 5 knots, and at 90 degrees it goes 6 knots, and downwind at 160 degrees true wind angle it also goes 6 knots and 15 knots of wind, then that's cool. And there are some vessels out there that do that sort of thing, and people use this polar. We're going to go back to the predefined polar, use our Leopard 50, and carry on. If it were me, this would be my starting point. I would go for a predefined polar. Even if my boat wasn't on there, I would choose one that was similar and start with that. You'll see here we have this motoring setting. So I can turn that on. So this is if you run into a light bit of weather, not much wind, and you're going to turn your motor on, the router can allow for that. And it can also tell you how long you're going to be motoring during your route. Your polar speed adjustment. So this is a course adjustment that you can make, and you can make it on the fly. So if you're out on the water, you can change this. And you'll see here we have at night. So upwind, downwind, and at night. And at night, it's harder to sail at night. I don't think you need to have sailed at night much to know that. And also there's some other considerations. Often we might have reduced sail at night just to be more cautious. And so we can actually, during the nighttime hours, we can actually have our polar at a lower percentage. And that's also calculated in the routing. So you can see here, I'm talking about lots of little things that will all add up to having a more accurate polar. It is really important to have an accurate polar, because the further ahead you're looking, the more those inaccuracies can sort of play out to sort of some different positioning. So we've got all that set up. I can come down here and I want to have my wave polar turned on. So that's off and then on. This wave polar here is our sort of main wave polar feature. You can do it the old way, the manual way. Don't just use the the wave polar here, the automatic routing, it does a very good job. Because I've got a predefined boat in here, I've got my Leopard at 50 in here. It's got this all set up for me. If I want to change this, I have to go over to the advanced polar. I can just copy my polar straight across, copy to advanced polar. I can just do that, copy, and I can go advanced, and I can come down here and I can change all these dimensions. But I don't, for what we're doing today, I don't need to. But you can see here, we do have all the different vessel types, and this is important that we do have this correct because it's going to actually model our boat off this. And you see here our displacement, waterline length, beam, and draft. And there's a little display here. Why that doesn't show a catamaran, I don't know. But yeah, we can see you get the point of what we're looking at. I'll just stick to my predefined polar there. So yeah, we've got that set up, and I will show you a bit later on why this is important and what the outputs that we're going to get for this. Route defaults, I can change the depth avoidance. So you can use land as the boundary, or you can use a depth contour, 2 meters, 5 meters. Probably more relevant for coastal sailing than doing a big crossing. But nonetheless, again, it's about having more accurate routing. So, obviously we can't sail onto the coastline, and even 2 meters would be pretty shallow. So I can click that onto 5 meters, and away we go. And down here, this is my tidal and ocean currents. So obviously when I'm routing, the routing tool is using a currents file, and I can change which currents model it's using. I'll just leave it on the Mercator. But if there was an area where you knew that one model did a better job than the other, you can change that over, and that's what the router will use in your routing calculations. Advanced routing adjustments, you don't need to use that. It's a race boat feature. If you want to get into it, you can, but it's not something I would fiddle with. So we've got our boat set up, and we're all pretty happy with that. We know how fast our boat's going to go. Well, we don't, because we want to look at our routing outputs, but we've got some idea. We've set this all up for our boat, and we are happy. So if I come over here to sail planning, the sail planning tab here, I'm back on my map page, and you'll see here I have my green start waypoint over here and my red destination waypoint over here, and I can drag those around the screen if I so wish, and I can also set them, change them over here in this box, and I can also add, so this is where I would adjust them. If I move that red one, you'll see the lat long changes there. So I could actually add this position. If I click on this little button here, it'll take me to where I am, and which is good on a GPS enabled device, and it would be good if I wasn't in New Zealand. But yeah, and so we can actually save courses in here too. If I push on this little plus button, I could add a waypoint, and I can actually make that a port or starboard rounding. And so if I made that into a starboard rounding, it would force the router to go below it. If I wanted to do that, I could actually force the router to go around that waypoint, and I can add a bunch of them. Generally, it is best to leave the router to be free to what it wants to do, unless you have good reason that you don't want to do what it's doing, which is, that's where seamanship comes in. And by all means, you may want to give a particular system a wider berth or whatever, and we can go back and change that once we've run our route. I could also do the same thing by putting a boundary in. I could add a, I could put a boundary in here, and the router would not go inside that boundary. Like, so for example, if I want to stop the router going too far north. So we've got that all set up, and I could change my start time over here for the whether I was routing or doing departure planning like we're doing here. And I can change that to the time zone that I'm in, wherever I am. And where are we? We're in the Atlantic. Anyhow, we can change our time to wherever we are. In fact, for me, I'm going to keep it in. Oh no, shouldn't have done this. Australia. No, Europe, Pacific. Here I am in the Pacific, and I'm in Auckland. I can set a time in the future, and I can also have my spacings here. How far apart do I want my route times to leave? So this is going to give us 4 different times to depart. And obviously we would have done quite a bit of planning even before we got to here. We would have been looking at our wind maps, and before that our pilot charts and things like that. And anyway, if we think we're going to depart in the next couple of days or whatever, we can run this departure planning, and I'll click on that calculate button, and it will just show us the differences if we leave at certain times. I mean, this can be really critical for even if you were going to do a short passage and island hop, 1 hour, or as in whether you would leave in the morning or the afternoon, and you can change that time step to hourly. But if you were going to do it, for this situation, obviously want them 24 hours apart. And sometimes, obviously, this is a huge passage that we're looking at, right? So the chances of us having nailing the entire weather window the whole way across is, we can do that, but we can probably manage ourselves across as we do our crossing. But there can be some obvious things that we may want to look at. If we left today, it could be really rough for the next in 2 days' time. But if we left tomorrow or the next day, we might completely avoid that nasty weather on day 2 and 3. Trying to avoid that weather now. I mean, we can look at it for day 10, but that's going to be more of a moving target, and we might manage our passage to avoid anything nasty that we had there. So you'll see here, if I just move my weather tool out the way, we have these wiggly lines. I'll just zoom in 1 click. We have our GMDSS warnings on the screen, and we can look at those, and we should, to understand what they're doing here. Like, for example, what's this one? Thunderstorms. And we could probably go and look at our different parameters to see, what in the forecast is going to be generating these thunderstorms. Is it a front? What is it that's creating that? So yeah, it's just, you can see we actually have that front in front of us there. So yeah, we can look at all those different parameters, but what we really want, and I can move my different, sorry, I'll close that for you. I can see these are my different departure times. There's my departure 1, day 1, day 2, day 3, and this is our little boats traveling across. You can see here on our departure 1, we get these weather warnings here. So let's go and have a look at what they are. And we've got a roll. So this is what, when we put our boat dimensions in before, has our roll. So that's, we've obviously gone above the threshold that we have for that. And then you'll see here roll and roll, lightning, rain squall. So we're going to get these warnings in our weather routing too. And yeah, and so this maybe you can see that we don't get these warnings if we leave on day 2 and day 3 and day 4. So yeah, it's very interesting. So what we can do is, and how we usually use the departure planning is, it's quite nice on a big passage like this to look at the map, but generally we look at the tables. And we see on each of these different departure times, we can see our passage time that's taken. See, that first one is faster, but it has that nasty weather later on. You know, average wind speed, maximum wind speed, gusts, and you know, that first one, you can see we get 40 knots. I mean, we're doing an ocean crossing, that's not unheard of. You know, the cape levels, we do get those higher cape levels on that first one. And then we saw that lightning and rain squall warning. So yeah, that would, you know, for a passage like this, let's knock it back a day, and avoid that weather. Another really important thing is to look at our time upwind, our time reaching, and time downwind. You know, so you know, we want to sail reach or sail downwind, and then the percentage of time for each of those departures that we're in these different wind speeds. If I come down here, I have my wave heights, and this here is actually really important. This is my my roll. And we saw in that first departure, we had warnings about the roll. So 11% of that passage, we're going to be in, have a motion, a rolling motion on our boat that is over 4 degrees RMS. So the root mean square. Don't need to worry too much about what that means. It's just a measure that the modeling uses. But anything above 4 is actually pretty uncomfortable. And we also have our vertical acceleration. So we don't, that's our lifting up and down. That can be an indicator of people getting seasick, and then boat slamming. So you'll see here, these numbers, they don't add up to 100. The reason that they don't add up to 100 is that we go outside the 10-day modeling window, and we go into the ensemble model. And so we'll talk a little bit about how that works once we run a weather route. So I'm going to go back to the map. We can, yeah, you can use this departure planning tool a lot. I would recommend using it a lot, and sit there and play with it now before you're doing your passage. So if I come back over here to weather routing and my sail routing. So I've now changed functions. So what we saw before, we were just looking at, we were actually looking at the ECMWF model for that departure planning. It was just a single model and it was using the 4 days. What we're going to do now is we are going to run the weather routing, and the weather routing will give us all 6 weather models, and we'll talk about sort of how that looks. So I've got my polars are set up, they're just the same, nothing's changed there. Because I've set them up in here, they will move around, and those settings, and then I can I could change my start time if I wanted to. I could move that to tomorrow, but let's leave it where we are and see how all the models go with that sort of that nasty weather that we saw, and yeah, and see how we get on. So I'll click on the download button, and we will calculate our route.
So the cool thing about how PredictWind does this is that we are, it sends this information to our servers, and our servers will use all the highest resolution data it can get. So, that's for all those weather models, it's going to use the highest resolution it can get. So ECMWF, that's 9K resolution the whole way across the Atlantic, and UKMO is 10 and 15 for the Spire. It'll use the high res PredictWind models where it can, 8K or even 1K once we're in the Caribbean. And or the GFS at 27K. So and along with that, it's also using the tidal. It'll use tidal currents. That's something I haven't talked about. Not so relevant for this, but it'll use our ocean currents, and it's also calculating our wave modeling. And I'll talk a bit more about the wave modeling once we get into these routes. So you can see here we've got these sort of routes, for all the different models. The different colors are the different models. So if I zoom in a bit over here, and you'll see they're, the different. So blue is the PWG, the red is the PWE, ECMWF is black, GFS is green, Spire, and UKMO. And so each one of those that I click on, it will move my little boat. So if I just scroll him forward a bit, it will move my little boat to the different model. And people often get a little bit worried about when we see something like this here, where we see these routes have split apart, and it's really not something to worry about. And how we handle that is a few ways. So firstly, if I come back here to our start time, so this is now, and I scroll through and I get to here. So we would have gone this far by the time the weather models update. So let's zoom in on that a bit. And you can see there we actually have a pretty strong consensus of all the models of where we should go. So we've got we could look at this one here as to why it's why the UKMO wants us to go out there. It's probably something to do with, let's have a brief look. Maybe more breeze just off the coast there. This is trying to give us the fastest route. But the reality is we would just sail down here and probably have a waypoint on our chart plotter somewhere here. And we would just sail our boat as best we could towards this waypoint that we would put on our plotter, and we would sail to that. Once we get to here, we will move our start waypoint to there, and we will rerun our route. So we would get to there and we rerun our route. And this is one of the reasons why you can enter the lat long in there, why you can do that GPS position from there. And also the data hub and an Iridium Go will actually transfer your position onto if you're using the offshore app, it will transfer your position into there. We just need to put where we are now into the routing and rerun our route. And we will do this after each model update time. And then you'll see again, so that was where we were now. And then I scroll through. We don't even make it to here before we would be running into the model update again. So every 12 hours, we're updating our routing. Then we'll put a waypoint into our plotter for here. And if we want to, we can probably put some longer term ones in. Do we want to see where we go? There might be some reasons here why we would want to look at whether, these routes want to take a more northern route, these ones want to take a more southern one, but we don't have to make that decision yet. We can actually make these decisions once we get to here, once we've run more routes, and you'll actually see the routes will keep coming into alignment. There's definitely, you know, some questions that we'd want to answer around these thunderstorms. I mean, the roll, it would be of consideration to me, and I would want to avoid that. And we can actually avoid these situations by either slowing down or putting a waypoint in further south. Let's come down here. Let's suggest that we've sailed all the way to here, and we'll run our route again, and we will let that calculate, and then we're going to have a look at some of the wave features, etc., and those outputs, and how we would look at them. So just calculating our route. It's crunching all that massive amounts of data in there. And you'll see there's this little prompt here. We see about AIS data, and then wave routing. And I'll talk about those in a minute. So you see here we have a warning. So we've got gust and lightning. Let's flick over to another model and see whether we have warnings. And again, we have a warning if we were on the ECMWF. And so let's go into our tables and have a look at what this actually looks like, because probably because we wouldn't do, but there's a system here and that will be creating waves. So if I come in here and I go to wave and close that, and you'll see that that sort of pulse of wave there, and that's probably what's causing our you know, our roll. And if I come over here as well and I look at the rain, and you'll see, you know, obviously there's a system. We would have avoided this. We would have not sailed into the system. We could have put a waypoint in to go round it. We could have slowed down and let it go in front of us. Ideally, we would not sail into the system. So what's happening here is this, as this moves, is that wave state that we can see, those waves are actually changing directions. And so we will end up with quite a mixed sea. We can end up with different wind wave, primary swell, secondary swell, and tertiary swell. And that's probably what's causing some of our boat roll situation. And we can see that how that looks in our modeling. So if I've just clicked on the tables here, and I can look at all these different ways of viewing our routing outputs. Before we get into that, I just will quickly digress and look at, I've just gone to this wind tab here, and this is where we can see the true wind speed and our speed over ground. So this is where we can decide, and our true wind angle. So this is where we can come and have a look and see if the routing output actually matches how fast our boat goes. So the true wind speed here, you know, so in 20 knots, true wind speed at 174, so we're running really flat. The S is for that we're on starboard jibe, and our speed over ground is 9.7 knots. And then you can see here, same, really similar wind speed, but we're a much hotter angle. 143, wouldn't really call that a hot angle, but yeah, we're on starboard jibe 143, and we're doing 10.7 knots. So obviously we go a bit faster as we come up, you know, and then 137 at 21 knots, we do 11.2. So it all makes sense, but you would have to say, do I do 11 knots in my Leopard 50 in 22 knots? I've never sailed on one, but I don't see why you couldn't.
But you want to make sure that these outputs are reflective of your polars. You know, this is your polar output right here. So yeah, you can have a good look at those and see whether it matches up. Also, our warnings are here, our gust warnings. Why are we getting the gust warning here? Because the average is 20 knots and the gust is 30. So big difference between an average wind speed and the gusts means that there's instability in the atmosphere. I mean, that's a big difference, and so that's something we want to be aware of. You know, we might sail a bit more cautiously. We might have, you know, just try and be a bit safer on board. And this would also relate to what we're going to look at here. So we can see our wind speed throughout our passage, true wind direction, true wind angle that we're sailing at. And we'll come down here and we can see that rain and the Cape. You know, where do these match up? You know, that's rain and Cape together. Again, it's another indicator of severe weather. Our temperature, pressure, is the pressure matching up with our barometer on board? You know, sort of a model validation thing. And then here is our wave height. And you can see, we looked at that before. We could see that wave height, and we're looking at the combined wind, wave, and swell. And so, you know, it does get pretty big, you know, sort of 3.5 meters. Wave direction, and we'll have a look at this. So wave direction, combined wind, wave, and swell. Sort of lines up, but so we're here. This, I think it was sort of through here that we see it getting pretty rough around the 28th, 29th. And so I look at the wind wave direction, and that sort of seems to line up. Look at the primary swell. It's quite different to the wind wave. Secondary swell, again, a different direction. And tertiary swell, if it's there, it sort of lines up with the secondary. But these different swell states, and you will see this everywhere, this is what our wave routing outputs are doing. This is why we put in our boat dimensions, and these are what these outputs are giving us. And it's really important because what it does, and I mean, another one to look at here would be wave period. You know, we could, if these are different, if they're different directions and different periods, it's going to be not very nice on board. We can see our currents, our ocean currents there, and direction. And these are our outputs. And this is what I was talking about, the roll. And so we say anything above 4, and we're marginal here. We don't get super high, you know, but it is going to be uncomfortable. And so we may not choose to avoid this. I mean, personally, I would avoid that system, especially if it intensifies. But you can see here, we're definitely getting up towards our threshold where things start to become quite, you know, not very nice. This here is great. You know, the 2s and below, that's just life. But if we want to start, you know, thinking about safety, you know, it might be that we just want to keep going, but we might go, okay, we know it's going to be pretty rough. We know that the boat's going to get thrown around. So we might have different safety protocols that we put in place on board. You know, no one goes on deck without wearing a harness and being clipped on, because we know that this weather is going to be nasty. You know, the wave state's going to be throwing the boat around. And so that, you know, we might put that rule in place. And then once we get to here, we might relax it a bit or not. But yeah, these outputs are very good. They are there for us to plan what's you know, what's coming, and to prepare, you know, for that sort of thing. And you see here that vertical acceleration in one of the models actually does go really high around the on the 29th, around the time that roll. And if we saw a bunch of this vertical acceleration going above 0.2, you know, if there's people that we know get seasick on board, we might start giving them seasick pills here on the 28th, so they're actually in the system before they get to here, and we know that it's going to be pretty rough. Boat slamming, again, we don't want to see boat slamming, and which is nice, we don't. We would normally only see that when we're going upwind. So yeah, because we're going with the wind, we shouldn't really see any of that. We can come and look at this different ways as well, and look at our, I mentioned all the different directions before. We can look at these in the tables, depends how you like to look at things, and see how we, see what our outputs are. And so you can see here, here's that 28th, 29th. We sort of start to see some of these warnings. And I can look at all the different models through here as well. PWG, come down here and look at the ECMWF. What's my warning? My warning is roll. So you will get these warnings throughout your route if there's certain conditions that we don't like, and they are very useful and should be looked at. I'm going to start wrapping up now. Obviously, we do have another webinar where we're going to use the Offshore app. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.